You remember the sound before anything else. A brass gate crashing shut, metal folding against metal, loud enough to make you flinch the first time you heard it. You were 6 or 7, maybe younger, holding your mother's hand in a department store lobby, and a man in white gloves and a dark uniform pulled open a door, and you stepped into a box no bigger than a closet. Wood panels on the walls, a half-moon dial above the door with a brass arrow, the smell of metal polish and perfume from the woman standing behind you. Your mother said 5, please, and the man turned a brass wheel on the wall and the floor moved under your feet. Not fast. Not smooth the way elevators move today. You felt it in your stomach first, that slow pull upward, and you squeezed your mother's hand tighter because you were inside a wooden box being lifted by something you could not see, and the only thing between you and whatever was below was a man in a cap with his hand on a wheel. "Going up," he said. And up you went. By the time you were older, you did not need your mother anymore. You walked in on your own, said your floor, and the man took you there. You did not press a button. You did not touch anything. If you were going to the 5th floor of a department store, he would announce it on the way. 2nd floor, ladies' lingerie, housewares, sporting goods. 3rd floor, children's clothing, toys, furniture. He knew the inventory of every floor because there had been a meeting that morning before the store opened. He knew what was on sale. He knew where the restrooms were and which floor had the lunch counter and whether the Santa line was long today or short. If you did not know what floor you needed, you told him what you were looking for, and he told you where to go. He was a map, a guide, and a concierge standing 3 feet away from you in a brass cage. When he reached your floor, he eased the wheel back toward center, slowing the car, and this was the part that separated the good ones from the new ones. Stopping that elevator exactly level with the floor was the hardest thing about the job. They called it leveling. A full car had different momentum than an empty one, and the operator had to feel it and adjust every single time. If he missed, and even the experienced ones missed, the car stopped an inch or 2 above or below the landing, and you would hear him say, "Step up" or "step down" as you got off. The really good operators hit it flush every time, and you never thought about it, the way you never think about a good driver shifting gears. The car just stopped where it was supposed to stop, the gate opened, and you walked out onto solid floor without a bump. If you ever rode one of those elevators in a department store or an office building or a hotel lobby, tell us about it in the comments. Tell us the building. Tell us what you remember about the man or woman who ran it, because that is the part no history book ever wrote down. Here's the thing almost nobody knows. Of every job the United States Census counted in 1950, 270 occupations, everything from telephone operators to bank tellers to typists, the elevator operator is the only one that automation completely erased. Not reduced, not changed, erased. A Harvard economist named James Besson confirmed it. Every other job that people said machines would kill found a way to survive in some form. The elevator operator did not. At its peak in 1950, there were 114,473 Americans earning their living inside those small brass boxes. By the 1970s, the job was functionally gone. The Census Bureau eventually stopped counting it altogether. It started with a man named Elisha Otis, a mechanic from Vermont, who stood on a platform at the Crystal Palace exhibition in New York in 1854. He ordered an assistant to cut the hoisting rope with an axe. When his safety brake caught after a few inches, he said the line that started the entire industry. "All safe, gentlemen, all safe." 3 years later, he installed the first safety passenger elevator at a department store on Broadway. Within a generation, buildings started growing past 5 stories, and somebody had to stand inside those cars and run them. The operator's world revolved around one piece of hardware. The car switch was commonly called the dead man's crank. It was a heavy bronze wheel weighing 10.5 pounds, and the name came from its safety feature. If the operator let go for any reason, a spring snapped the handle back to center, and the car stopped immediately. You turned it left to go down, right to go up, and the farther you turned it, the faster the elevator moved. Some models had a button on top of the handle that you had to press continuously while the car was in motion. If your hand slipped, if you passed out, if anything went wrong, the elevator stopped. The dead man's crank assumed the worst about human beings and built a fail-safe around it. The people who operated these machines were not random hires. In office buildings and hotels, they were mostly men, dressed in uniforms that looked almost military. Dark navy or black jackets, shoulder braiding on the finer hotel uniforms, peaked caps, and always the white cotton gloves. At the Space Needle during the 1962 World's Fair, they recruited tall women and dressed them in blue tops with dramatic red capes. Department stores took it further than anyone. Marshall Field's on State Street in Chicago ran a legendary 8-week charm school for its elevator girls, covered by Life magazine in September 1947. The curriculum included makeup and hairstyling, posture drills with photographs showing wrong and right ways to stand, elocution lessons so they could clearly announce merchandise like lingerie, bric-a-brac, and budget millinery, and instruction on how to walk, sit, and operate the car with grace. Life described it as operators being sent to be kneaded, pummeled, and painted in a flossy charm school in the Loop. One of those elevator girls was a young woman from New Orleans named Dorothy Lamour, earning $17 a week before she was discovered and became a Hollywood star. Marlon Brando, 19 years old and fresh off a bus to Greenwich Village in 1943, worked as an elevator operator at Best & Company department store before anyone knew his name. At the Stevens Hotel in Chicago, a man named Joseph Guidara started in 1939 and remembered the standards for the rest of his life. Our starter treated us like Army recruits. We had to stand at attention every morning, clean-shaven, hair cut every 2 weeks, white gloves and uniforms. Guidara nearly died on the job when he stepped back into what he thought was his elevator on the 11th floor. But mechanics had moved the car to the 12th. He got 1 foot in and 1 foot out over an empty shaft, and something made him hold on. He thought about it for 40 years after. The racial history of this profession is one of its most important and most painful chapters. Under Jim Crow, elevator operator was one of the handful of jobs available to black men in America. Even those with college educations worked as elevator operators, porters, janitors, and waiters in Harlem in the 1920s, earning $1,300 a year. The cruelest part was this. In states with segregation laws, black operators who ran elevators all day were sometimes barred from riding those same elevators during their free time. During the Great Depression, when general unemployment hit 25%, black unemployment reached 50%. And black operators were fired and replaced by recent European immigrants under the belief that white men should not be without work while black men were employed. Hubert Henry Harrison, the man they called the Black Socrates of the Harlem Renaissance, worked as an elevator operator when he first arrived in Manhattan before becoming one of the most influential intellectuals of his era. Brilliant mind, trapped in a brass cage. They organized. The Building Service Employees International Union formed in 1921 in Chicago, and unlike most unions of its era, it was integrated from the start. In New York, Local 32B formed in 1934 under David Sullivan, an Irish immigrant who had started as an operator in the 1920s and later marched with his members at the March on Washington in 1963. But the moment that changed everything happened on September 24, 1945, 3 weeks after the end of World War II. Roughly 15,000 elevator operators, doormen, and porters walked off the job across New York City's commercial buildings. The strike lasted nearly a full business week, and the impact was staggering. 1.5 million New Yorkers simply would not climb the stairs or cross a picket line. Self-operating elevators barely existed in 1945, and the city's tall buildings made elevators a necessity, not a convenience. Mail delivery stopped. The federal government lost an estimated $8 million a day in tax revenue. Total economic damage reached $100 million. And the most devastating revelation of the strike was this: the public utterly refused to operate the elevators themselves. People had watched operators work those levers thousands of times, but the idea of doing it yourself was, as one account put it, simply an outrageous thought. Several people died in accidents when untrained tenants and firemen tried to run the cars. Governor Dewey stepped in and demanded arbitration. The strike ended with a 10-year peace agreement, but terrified building owners had already made their decision. They were never going to let workers hold the vertical city hostage again. Money poured into automatic elevator technology. An elevator company official told Popular Science in 1959 what everyone was thinking. Automatic elevators do not go on strike, get sick, or step outside for a smoke. The technology had actually existed for decades. The first push-button elevator patent was filed in 1886. By 1900, fully automated elevators were available, but passengers walked in, looked around at the empty car, and walked right back out. They wanted a person. The pivotal moment came in 1950 when Otis installed its Autotronic system at a building in Dallas, the first high-speed, operatorless elevators in a commercial building. The system coordinated multiple cars as a group, predicted traffic patterns, and saved building owners $7,000 per car per year. By 1959, over 90% of new elevator installations were automatic. In 1950, it had been just 12%. The profession collapsed in under a decade. But people were afraid. They did not trust a machine to carry them up 40 floors without a human at the controls. So the industry mounted a campaign. Advertisements showed children pressing buttons and grandmothers riding alone. A big red stop button was installed in every car to give passengers the illusion of control. Recorded voices announced that this is an automatic elevator and asked passengers to press the button for the floor they desired. Music was piped into the cars. Mirrors were added to reduce claustrophobia. Every innovation was designed to solve the same problem. The person who used to stand next to you was gone, and you were alone in a moving box. The most extraordinary story to come out of this profession happened on a Saturday morning, July 28, 1945, at the Empire State Building. A B-25 bomber, lost in fog, slammed into the 79th floor. A 20-year-old elevator operator named Betty Lou Oliver was working the car they called G-Bank number 6. It was supposed to be her last day on the job. She was injured by the impact and placed into an elevator to be taken down for medical help. The cable snapped. She fell from the 75th floor to the sub-basement, roughly 1,000 feet across 75 stories. She survived. It remains the Guinness World Record for the longest survived elevator fall. They called her the Sunshine Girl for her attitude at Bellevue Hospital. She spent 4 months recovering, and the day she was discharged, she rode an elevator to the top of the building. At the other end of the spectrum was a quieter kind of heroism. Wilson Roosevelt German started at the White House in 1957 as a cleaner under Eisenhower. Jacqueline Kennedy promoted him to butler. In his later years, he served as the White House elevator operator. He served 11 presidents across 6 decades. George W. Bush said German was the first person they saw leaving the residence every morning and the last person they saw returning at night. Michelle Obama featured him in her memoir. He died of COVID-19 in 2020 at age 91, having carried more presidents between floors than any person in American history. A few of them are still out there. The Fine Arts Building on Michigan Avenue in Chicago still runs manually operated elevators with human operators who pull levers, crank handles, and close brass gates by hand. The Hotel del Coronado in San Diego still runs an Otis that has been carrying guests since 1888. In Oregon, a man named David Filippi operates a 1929 Otis every day and admits it gets addictive, being part of the machine. A handful of luxury apartment buildings in Manhattan still employ elevator men who know every resident by name. The U.S. Senate still has operators riding its automated elevators because some traditions die harder than others. When department stores first automated their elevators in the 1950s and the 1960s, they discovered something the accountants had not predicted. Customers complained. They missed the person. Some stores installed tape machines to announce the floors. It was not the same. A few stores actually brought staff back to ride the elevators just to have someone to talk to. The lesson was simple and expensive. Machines can say good morning, but they cannot make people feel good morning. The elevator operator stood in a space smaller than a closet and controlled something most people were quietly afraid of. He made that fear disappear, not with technology, but with his presence. He knew your floor before you said it. He knew your name if you came through often enough. In Manhattan, where most operators were black and most riders were white, the elevator was one of the few places where people of different races stood shoulder to shoulder every single day, sharing a small enclosed space for 30 or 60 seconds at a time, mediated by a man whose entire job was to bring people up and bring them down. If that job still existed at historical ratios, New York City alone would need somewhere around 200,000 elevator operators today. The Empire State Building would need roughly 200. Instead, it needs 0. Of 270 occupations counted in the 1950 census, this is the only one that is completely gone. Not the telephone operator, not the typist, not the bank teller. They all survived in some form. Only the person who stood in a small brass box, pulled a lever, and announced going up was made fully, permanently, irreversibly obsolete. Somewhere in a building that has probably been torn down by now, a man in white gloves collapsed a brass gate, turned a wheel, and carried you to whatever floor you needed. The car swayed slightly. The arrow swept across the dial. He announced the floor, opened the gate, said, "Watch your step," and you walked out without thinking about any of it, because that is how ordinary it was. And ordinary was the entire point. The ordinary things are always the last ones you realize mattered. If any part of this brought something back, leave a like. It helps other people find these stories. Subscribe if you haven't, because we do this every week. We take a piece of everyday American life that quietly vanished and try to understand what was actually lost when it went. And drop a comment. Tell us the building. Tell us the city. Tell us what the operator said to you when you stepped in. Tell us if you ever watched him work that brass wheel and wondered how he stopped it right on your floor every single time. Remember, that's the part we couldn't find in any archive. That's the part only you still carry.